Right, hello everybody, welcome to the 59th episode of the On the Line Tennis Podcast. It's me, Jack. After some technical issues, we are here, 9 o'clock UK time, joined by Nick Carter. Nick, how are you doing?
I am doing very well, thanks, Jack. Yeah, I've had a good day. It's the tennis is on. Andy Murray is playing Stanford Rinker. It's like old times.
He's not losing. I mean, he's not winning in the second set, but he's not losing. Today, Nick is going to join us in talking about the Masters tournament that was just on. Montreal for the men's, Toronto for the ladies. We had Pablo Carreno Busta, of all people, winning the men's title, and we had on the ladies' side a total mind blank there. I was about to say Swiatek. It's not Swiatek, of course. It is Simona Halep that won the tournament on the women's side. So we're going to run through some of our picks for the matches, early exits, matches of the tournament, finalists, basically talking about their runs and stuff like that. Nick, are you happy to do that?
Oh, but that's why I'm here. Always up for talking tennis.
It is exactly why you're here. You're quite right. We'll start with Montreal with Nick, keen as ever. And first thing I'd like to talk about is the early rounds, I guess, and some of the early exits there. But first, Nick, unless you've got the answer, you can have a think about it throughout the podcast. I have a bit of trivia for you. You might not know the answer, don't worry, no pressure if you don't. But the question is, phrased like this. Pablo Carreno Busta is now the second oldest first-time Masters champion of all time. Can you guess the oldest player ever to win their first Masters title? You might know it already. If not, you can just have a think, a ponder.
I think I know it.
Oh, you think you know it? Okay. Wait, okay, save it to the end then, Nick. Save it to the end, because then we can give listeners a chance to answer as well.
Or Google it.
Or Google it, exactly. Yeah, depends how morally sound they are. Let's talk about some early exits first. Nick, the first one I just want to talk about. As always, I feel like a broken record on the show, but I have to address it. Andy Murray's first loss to Taylor Fritz, or the first round loss even to Taylor Fritz, a miserable 6-1, 6-3 scoreline. Before I ask you for your opinion on it, Nick, I will just give you a quick stat just to give you an idea of how woeful a performance it was. 21% second serves won for Andy. By my calculations, the worst second serve rate of Andy Murray's career in any of his matches. Now, that's some doing if you're going to get 21% second serves won. Even against a good player like Fritz, that's pretty damn bad, 6 out of 29. Rakic got smashed at the end of the match. He seemed absolutely livid with it. Were you worried for Andy in this one, Nick? Did you get to see it at all?
It was on either too late or there was another match going on that I was watching, probably a WTA match.
Andy doesn't get priority, Nick.
I didn't. Well, as you get to know me, you realise I'm more of a WTA guy. But I would say that I think I thought I was going to switch over to it eventually, and then I saw the scoreline. I was like, oh, it's already over, and I didn't know that Andy played that bad.
Yeah.
No one went with 21% second serves, even Rafa Nadal, and that's just not great. I just thought that Fritz was too strong for him. I thought it was a bad day, but I didn't think it was that bad.
Yeah, you're kind of right at the same time, Nick. Yeah, I've probably blown it a bit out of proportion, but I mean, Taylor Fritz did play really well. To be fair, but when you put it amidst all the other all the other second serve percentages of Andy's career, it does sound pretty bad. I'm going to move on from it, to be honest, Nick. It's just going to make me sad at the moment. He's playing well against Stan. We're going to move on to another more exciting and generally higher quality match. In Tommy Paul defeating Carlos Alcaraz. Did you get to see that one, Nick?
Caught the end of it. I didn't tune in at first because I thought Alcaraz would win it easily, and it looked like he was going to because he was up in the match. But then suddenly there's this tie break, which suddenly is epic quality, and then I catch the end of it. Alcaraz is doing what he usually does and just going clutch on match point down, or break point down, just going clutch and hitting big, but Tommy Paul, match of his career, beats highest ranked player he's beaten, best tournament I've seen him play. So can't fault him really, but I found it weird that Alcaraz let that one go.
Yeah, Yeah, I'd agree with you, and I certainly think, yeah, best match of Tommy Paul's career, definitely by a long shot. Little weird that Carlos wasn't able to convert. It definitely looked a little bit under par. Did allude to the fact that he hadn't played on hard courts for quite a while, so maybe a little bit rusty, even if he didn't sort of fully admit it, and even Tommy Paul sort of said that as well. Bit more on Tommy Paul though, in the clutchness. He, according to Vanch on Twitter, Vanch always with the stats, amazing stuff, delivered a first serve on some incredibly important points, four very important ones in particular. The match point, for example, in the second set tiebreak, break points in the third set, could not have been clutcher in a lot of ways, Nick. So I feel like Tommy Paul really, really deserved that one. And kind of Carlos, yeah, a little bit his fault, but to be honest, you have to play completely out of your skin to beat this guy. I think he's proven that time and time again this season, and Tommy Paul stepped up. So incredibly impressive. One of the next matches I wanted to talk about, Casper Ruud, who made a pretty deep run at the start of the tournament, was able to beat RBA. Roberto Bautista Agut, one of the most noteworthy things in the match, absolutely got to cover it, because people will give the guy stick, till the cows come home. Obviously, 250 Vulture, etc., etc. But I mean, the guy is not just a forehand after all. In the second set tiebreak, Ruud stepped up to deliver four backhand winners. I mean, the backhand had been a little rusty at the start of the match, but it's like with his back against the wall, the guy has a backhand now. I'm sure these are improvements he's been making in general. Could be the key to success going forward if he can continue to drive it. I mean, driving a backhand winner past Roberto Bautista Agut is insanely difficult. So to do four in one tiebreak, yeah, I mean, it saved him this tournament, because obviously if he'd lost that tiebreak, he'd have been out. And I think he just deserves a little bit of credit. I don't know. Do you not think his backhand's maybe a bit better than people make it out to be, Nick?
Oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, everyone goes on about the Casper Ruud forehand, and it is a monster. But yeah, that backhand is, yeah, it's a solid shot. Um, and I mean, I don't really look, to be honest. I haven't really watched enough Casper Ruud to fully analyze his game. But I certainly don't think he's got a bad shot in his arsenal. He's world class. And look,
No.
I've gone I've gone on record as saying at the beginning of the year I said Casper Ruud was overrated, and then the rest of the year he's completely proven me wrong. I'm very happy about that because he's produced some absolutely great tennis. Um, and yeah, that's what I would say. Is I think I've just learned not to say anything bad about Casper Ruud now. I think he's having a great year, and he played so, to win that match against Bautista Agut in the red
Yeah.
was impressive.
Yeah, absolutely agreed, Nick. Yeah, you summed it up quite well, because I totally had my doubts about Casper at the start of the year, and he's blown them all out of the water, and I just want him to keep getting better. The serve is really good in hard courts nowadays. I'm going to talk about a little bit about Slice later on. It actually deserves a lot of credit too, but yeah, just thought he deserved plaudits for how he put away that backhand in this match in particular. The next match I'd like to talk about very quickly is Nick Kyrgios defeating Daniil Medvedev. Did you get to see this one?
I did. Fortunately, I had a friend round who doesn't watch much tennis, but does like Nick Kyrgios, mostly because he finds him funny. From what I could see, it was what we thought the match was going to be. Big serves from Kyrgios, great returning from Medvedev. Kyrgios held up a lot better in the baseline rallies than I thought he would. Medvedev not quite as effective at breaking down the serve as I thought he might be. And I think it was just those margins that tipped the favouring everything Kyrgios' favour, really. I have to say that the whole, again, as a tournament as a whole, it's the hardest I've ever seen Kyrgios try.
Yeah, oh, definitely. I agree with that, Nick. And actually, there was very few meltdowns relative to the amount of meltdowns that Kyrgios normally has. I would definitely agree with you. I thought he came up, like a wall basically when he was on return against Medvedev. But for me, the biggest difference was probably how he covered his serve so well, serving, volleying basically all the time. So impressive, and such a apt strategy against Medvedev, who obviously camps himself about 7 meters behind the baseline. The way he was serving and volleying, reminiscent of Novak Djokovic last year at the Paris Masters, I felt, having done an analysis of that match as well. I will elaborate a wee bit. Serving wide basically opens up the court against Medvedev, and you can put the first volley short because of how deep in the court he is, basically. Djokovic did it over and over again in Paris, and we saw Kyrgios do it here in Canada. So Kyrgios taking notes out of Djokovic's playbook, Nick. How do you feel about
And
that?
Hubert Hurkacz, I would say, actually, from Wimbledon last year, because
Yeah,
like that was the match where Medvedev was 2-1 up, and then they had the break, and then Hurkacz came back. And what I noticed about that match was
yeah.
Hurkacz started serving and volleying a lot more, and I think the rest of the tour is now catching on. If you want to beat Medvedev, you serve and volley. For some reason, there's greater return, as greater baseliner he is. He doesn't seem to like it when people go aggressive and serve volley against him. Like Djokovic, who's like rivals him in like his baseline coverage, can pick off a serve volleyer, but that seems to be going ultra aggressive against Medvedev actually works.
Mhm. Certainly, for somebody like Djokovic, his return stance isn't so deep in the court, so it's a lot harder to do against him. That's why it works so well against Medvedev, basically. But yeah, it's not easy to pull off, and Kyrgios and Djokovic seem to be the only two, and Hurkacz, yeah, for a while. That but certainly Kyrgios and Djokovic did it consistently throughout their matches, not just as sort of a one-off tactic. So seriously impressive from the two of them. Kyrgios in particular, obviously, I didn't expect it from. It'll be interesting to see if Medvedev adjusts his return tactics in Cincinnati should they rematch in the quarterfinals, which would be exciting. Happy to move on to match of the tournament, Nick.
Yeah, well, match of the tournament. Okay, I'm interested to hear what it is because I thought for some people it was Ruud versus Bautista Agut with all the winners that got hit. So I had like 100 winners between them. So which I thought was the stat you were going to bring out, to be honest. So I'm interested to know what the match of the tournament is.
Wow, I didn't hear that. That's a good stat. Well, my match of the tournament, and I'd be interested to hear if you've got one as well, Nick. But certainly, maybe that's yours. I certainly felt was Dan Evans v Tommy Paul. If you got to catch any of that.
Yeah, I'm massively impressed by Dan Evans. I mean, that's what I was referring to earlier when I said Paul got unstuck by someone who was having a very similar run. I missed all of Evans' matches. They were all on it late, but this looks like probably the best run he's ever had at a tournament. I mean, you could include the Monte Carlo Masters where he beat Djokovic, but I think that consistently putting in quality match after quality match um, might be better. I don't know. There's probably some recency bias in there, but certainly, that's the slice was working particularly well for him this week.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with all of that, Nick. I felt like the quality he showed here was far higher, not far higher, but certainly higher than it was in Monte Carlo. Just give you a little bit of a rundown what happened, and first also Mark Petchey's quote on it. One of his top 5 matches of the year, tennis from the black and white era of TV. Absolutely loved it, and I'd agree with him. Certainly, remembering Tommy Paul's run last year in Stockholm, he was very, very net approach friendly. Took time away from his opponent in nearly every match, particularly against Andy. I remember him doing that in the quarterfinals in Stockholm, and obviously Dan, likes to do the same thing. Dan actually really difficult to come forward against because of the variety he can show when he's got a passing shot. If you go to his backhand, he can lob you, he can slice low, he can even drive it if he needs to. But it didn't stop Paul from coming forward, and it made for some really, really exciting points. I felt like stuff that we hadn't seen from two players in quite a while. Just a few points to watch if anybody is going to watch it back. I would recommend watching Love One in the third set, 15-0. I'd recommend watching the match point at 5-3, and I'd recommend watching 15-0, 5-4 in the third set. All of those points involved some sort of crazy net stuff, basically. So it's definitely worth watching back. And if you haven't seen those points, it's really, really good. Are you happy to talk about the finalists, Nick?
Yeah, I'm definitely happy with that.
Yeah. The first, well, I'll talk about Hurkacz first, I think, and just his match against Kyrgios. Did you get to see any of that? To be honest, I'm not going to talk too much about it, but yeah, did you get to see any of that match?
Look, to be honest, I don't tend to watch Kyrgios matches, but not for the reason everyone says. Most people would say. Most people would say they don't watch it because they don't like his histrionics. And it's true that I find that incredibly irritating. The reason I don't like watching Kyrgios is because I do not like his style of play. And he's actually the one tennis player that I will go like, he's pretty good. His serve is epic, but I don't like watching how he plays tennis. It looks like he's trying to make minimal effort apart from that Medvedev and that Dimonor match this week, where it's kind of exceptions to that and impressed me a little bit more. But generally, I avoid Kyrgios matches unless it's really deep in a tournament. So I missed it. So yeah, by the sound of it, he didn't play that well. For what I could hear from other people, what other people were saying, it sounded like he just ran out of energy a bit. I don't know if you saw it, whether that you can verify that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with quite a lot of that actually. Nick. I think I can see why the lack of fight sometimes, maybe if that's what you want to, how you want to put it, would be a little bit of a turn off and kind of stops you maybe enjoying his matches as much. Totally makes sense. I did get to see it, and in the final set, he looked like he run out of gas, which I suppose we'd kind of expect at this point. Some of the mental effort he's put into matches recently, ironically, having been on a streak of 7 matches won from a set down, maybe he finally hit the wall. I don't know. To be honest, it wasn't really worth watching. It wasn't worth watching the whole match back. To be honest, quite a lot of serving in the first 2 sets, and then the final set he just vanished basically. Maybe you'll prefer talking about Hurkacz's match against Ruud in the semi-finals if you got to see any of that.
Yeah, I watched. From what I can tell about that match, Ruud probably should have won it in some ways. Like he definitely had Hurkacz on the ropes at points with his ground strokes, but he never seemed to be able to make the most of his advantage. Like he blew a lead in the first set, he blew a lead in the second set. Let Hurkacz just played a really scruffy service game right at the start of the third, to let Hurkacz take the advantage. And Hurkacz is too good a player, like to do that. Like for all his ability to occasionally bottle stuff in early rounds, he took the opportunity with both hands. And I don't want to diminish what he was doing. Like he was serving really well. You know, his forehand return, his backhand return, super effective. His forehand really deep and penetrating and placed perfectly when it counts. But I do feel like Ruud just made a few too many errors at critical points, or it had really bad patches that just kept letting Hurkacz back in. I think if he played a lot more consistently, Ruud probably would have won that match.
Yeah. I've got a few tactics for you and just a bit of an elaboration on that. Certainly, what you're talking about, errors and maybe looking like he was a little bit lackluster at times. The difference maker for me was Casper's second serve and how he prepared himself after he hit second serve. So right down at 31%, his lowest rate this year, really, really, really low for him. Gave up way too much ground for me on the +1 shot, trying to camp in the ad court, basically. You know, how often we see Casper try and find the forehand as the first shot, basically. But against Hubie, you know, if you're second serving into the ad court and you go to his backhand, he is able to place it down the line. And there was times that Casper, you know, was scrambling to get a forehand back into play when really that shouldn't have been happening. He was just so determined basically to be in the ad court, and he gave up a lot of ground there, and it made a massive difference in the crucial breaks in the second and third sets. They were points that Hubie ended up winning because Casper was on the back foot basically from the first ball, and it really shouldn't be happening on the second serve against a guy who's not going to absolutely hammer it, basically. You know, somebody who's just going to sort of caress it into the right spot in the court. So it was a difference maker, and it was sad to see him not adjust his tactics, and it worries me a little bit that maybe he might not be as savvy in the court as I thought he was. You know, he certainly got all the shots, but maybe tactically, in some ways, a little bit lacking, was what I would have said.
Yeah, I'd say so. That's probably what's held him back against, breaking through against top players. Like, he's yet to beat Djokovic and Nadal. I don't know what his record is against Medvedev. But yeah, I think that's probably a lot to do with it. Is he lacks the imagination a little bit, potentially. I don't know. Again, Casper Ruud has a habit of proving me wrong. So go for it, Casper. Prove me wrong.
Yeah.
Be happy with that.
That's a fair point. One tactic that might get you back on board here, that he did use. Okay, he lost the match, but one thing I'm going to enjoy seeing from him in the future is his slice is such a good weapon if you can do it right, because it generally coaxes the other player into hitting a slice as well, and that's when you could see Casper camping in the ad court because he knows he's going to get a slice back. He's able to hit forehands off of slices so much better than the rest of the tour. Nadal is like the only other guy that rivals him for that. So if he can get a slice and do it well, it'll be such a weapon for him on a hard court. It's something that'll let him get more forehands to put into play on that surface, when other players maybe who have big forehands might not be able to do the same thing, basically. Super impressed with that. So yeah, tactically, if he can start sort of adding to stuff like that, Nick, I definitely think he'll be proving me and you wrong at some point for sure. One Hubie tactic just before we move on, Nick, if you're interested in this. Hubie's second serve approaches to the net, second serve and volley rather than first serve and volley, exploiting Casper Ruud's purposefully deep return position, just like Medvedev, but basically just ask him the question, and so often that you couldn't answer the question just because of how far back he was. Basically, didn't really have another option. We saw Hurkacz sometimes back out of that tactic and lose the point. So, if he kept sticking to his guns, I don't think he'd have lost that first set, because there was a break point at 5-all where he didn't come in off the back of a second serve. And it's a really effective tactic against Casper Ruud. It's not something we see other players do, really. So, yeah, really, really interesting. Are you happy to move on to Carreno Busta and his run, Nick?
Yeah, I definitely.
Yeah, you a big fan of this guy?
Yeah. So he's kind of grown on me over the years. I remember when he got to the 2017 US Open semi-final, and my immediate reaction was, okay, but he was in the half of the draw that completely fell apart that year, and so I just didn't really rate that achievement very highly. I remember it was like, Cilic went, like, Murray pulled out, Cilic went out early. Suddenly, Zverev crashed out. The Americans had the opportunity. Querrey and Isner could have gone deep. They bottled it, and then the semi-final ended up being Kevin Anderson and Pablo Carreno Busta, and two people I never thought would get to a Grand Slam semi-final. So I didn't really think much of it. And then 2020 US Open semi-final, okay, I was like, okay, he's done it again. That's really, and I was impressed by that. He did kind of let it go against Zverev in there. But again, at the time, I didn't consider beating Zverev to be that hard. But what I would say is that the Olympics really impressed me. That bronze medal match against Novak Djokovic, he played so well. And actually, that match where he played, like, he has a habit of frustrating Djokovic. In the match where Djokovic had to pull out, PCB was playing very well. I say pull out, I'm being very, what's the word? Kind to him there. Diplomatic. But yeah, going to this tournament, like, I think my thoughts were, Carreno Busta proved he's not just a baseliner, because I think when most people think of Carreno Busta, they think of people like him, like Bautista Agut, like the standard Spaniard who's good on the baseline and can frustrate you and get into a rally. They've got weapons, but they're not spectacular. They're not that sexy. But Carreno Busta kind of broke that stereotype a little bit, including showing he's got a decent serve and volley. And it seems to be serve and volley seems to be very much the theme of Canada this week, because again, we talk about Kyrgios serve and volley tactic working. Hurkacz is an excellent serve and volley. He got to the final by doing that off a second serve. And Pablo Carreno Busta, again, using the opportunities to come in and do that. I think I watched this match against Berrettini first round, and I thought he played super well to break Berrettini down, beating Evans, who was on that great run. And then, in the final, I must confess, I mean, like, I like both players, but I was rooting for Carreno Busta to a little bit, because I thought, actually, Gio, if anyone deserves to have a Masters 1000 on their CV, it's him. And yeah, I was happy to see him, like, be aggressive, vary up the tactics. The only reason he lost the first set was one poor game in the middle of it. But other than that, like, he was almost flawless, really. And that point in the third set, that was like, I can't remember what the score was, but like, it was just like they were all over the court, and there was lob volleys, and I don't know if you remember what the score was at that point, but I think that was incredible from both players, and the Carreno Busta deployed that sort of touch and variety to finish it. And again, I was massively impressed by this title run, and I think it's the best I've ever seen him play, to be honest. Well deserved champion.
Yeah, probably the crowning achievement of his career. I think that point, by the way, was 3-all in the third set, or 3-2, sorry, in the third set, the first point of Carreno Busta's service game. So impressive. Definitely watch it back if you haven't seen it at home. It's very, very cool. I have a few bit of analyses, if you'll indulge me. Nick, one just very quickly against Sinner, because the match against Sinner was, for me, the most impressive match he played all week. The Hurkacz one was good, but I'm going to get on to why Hurkacz maybe made a little bit of a meal of that one. Compared to one like Sinner, who was still playing high quality tennis, Carreno Busta made him look really, really basic though. Yeah, I mean, Sinner's got one of the biggest backhands in the game. Top spin rates unrivaled by any other player. Really, he actually has the most top spin on his backhand, or a double hander at least, compared to anybody else. But PCB was able to make Sinner overheat by putting him in, classic tactics, really put him in backhand jail cross court. PCB's one of the best guys at it. He was hitting the shot fantastically well, making the shot basically unattackable from that position every single time. Sinner just looked absolutely desperate, unable to capitalise on second serves as well, because there was nowhere he could really hit into where PCB wouldn't be able to get a backhand defence back into court, and if it went into the forehand, you could sort of attack on it. It was perfect stuff against Sinner, and I was really, really, really impressed by it. Definitely for me, the match of his tournament out of everybody he played, and I mean, he played some amazing matches, so really, really impressive. A little bit of an analysis on the Hurkacz match. He becomes the first unseeded champion in over 20 years, 7th career ATP title for him. In terms of what I thought made the difference, I think it was more about Hubie than Carreno Busta. There was a break in the second set and the third set that made all the difference, and it absolutely positively came down to the shaky forehand that has been Hurkacz's bane for a few years now. He gets away with less forehand aggression in general on faster surface by coming in off the back of a lot of his forehands, using obviously the wingspan of him to put away volleys basically when he's hit that first forehand, even if he's not absolutely smacked it. Unfortunately though, finding those first forehands when pinned so deep in the court against PCB was really, really difficult. And then when he had a few +1 forehands in the second and third sets, he gave them away really, really cheaply under pressure. I think he gave away 3 +1 forehands in the second set when he was broken, and then the third there was 2 in a row. He ended up doing a forehand drop shot instead. It was really, really ugly. I don't know if you remember that one on break point. Just looked like he didn't want to drive through it at all. I mean, he wouldn't have got broken if those forehands hadn't been so shaky, and there wasn't really an excuse for him missing them. It's a real shame for me, Nick, because he's such a good player under pressure generally. He's such a good server, but when it comes to a rally and when it comes to sort of long drawn out points, he doesn't really have a way of finishing off the point reliably. Am I being too harsh, Nick? I feel like
I don't.
I feel like I'm being fair,
Hurkacz,
but it's certainly
I think Hurkacz is a better player than a lot of people give him credit for. But I don't think that's what you're saying. I mean, from a tactical perspective, yeah, he can. That forehand can break down, because the nature of it, when I talked about it earlier, is that he can perfectly place it. He can use a lot of top spin on it, but he can overloop it as well. I don't think that's a word you use in tennis, but I'm going to use it anyway. So I completely see where you're kind of coming from there, with that, and sort of how break it down. At the end of the day, that's probably what won the match. I think what won PCB the match. I think PCB's, going back to the stereotype I mentioned of Spaniards being pretty solid. Like, he was the more solid player. He was harder to break down than Hurkacz. I think if Hurkacz had played most other people in that draw, he might have won that match. But playing Busta was able to put enough pressure on him to capitalise on those errors, and was aggressive enough to put him on the back foot and force him to make errors. So although, we could probably say that there were some tactical issues with Hurkacz, I would probably put the story of the match more on Carreno Busta getting it right than Hurkacz getting it wrong.
fair enough, Nick. Yep, that's fair enough. I have got a few more stats on him on the blog and how he held serve so easily. However, I won't go into that. I won't play my whole hand at this point. But I definitely, I agree with you to some extent. I just thought it was a shame that Hurkacz maybe made it a little bit less close than he could have made it, I guess, in the end. But anyway, you're right. The plaudits do need to go to Carreno Busta. Incredibly impressive. That should be the takeaway. Back in the top 15, wins his first Masters title at 31 years old. Bringing us back to that question at the start of the podcast, Nick. Do you know who the oldest Masters champion of all time is, given Carreno Busta is the second oldest. First time Masters champion of all time, I should stress.
I believe it's the giant, the marathon man that is John Isner.
Yes, it is. It is. Good knowledge. Do you know the Masters tournament?
Yeah, it was Miami in 2018. I remember. I know there's a lot of people who don't really give Isner a lot of credit, or don't particularly like him. But I was so pleased for him that he won that match, because I feel like with that serve of his has got such a reputation, he deserved to have a big prize from it. And he's been to multiple Masters 1000 finals. He's the victor of the longest match of all time. That he needed something else in his CV other than that. So I was very, very pleased for him when he won that title. So yeah, remember it well.
Are you happy to move on to the Toronto Masters?
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Cool. Okay. The first place I would like to start, of course, Simona Halep won. Amazing title for her. I'm definitely a Halep fan, so it was very, very good for me to see her win. There was other players that could have won this week, to be fair. I would have been happy with Haddad Maia winning, for example, in the final, but it was just nice to see a vet of the game winning a Masters title. Obviously different circumstances in that this is now her 9th Masters title, so kind of different from Carreno Busta. I would like to start with some of the early exits, however, just talk about those. One that is kind of an early exit, it's not a surprising exit, but Serena Williams at the start of the tournament losing to Bencic. It was her farewell in Toronto. Very, very emotional. For me, not a match she should have been winning, obviously, and I'm sure a lot of people would agree with that. I stand by what I said on my blog. I believe Serena is going to struggle against players at the moment that use pace to not counter punches per se, but certainly somebody like Bencic who's able to take the first serve away from Williams and sort of redirect it in the court. People that can move her around, basically, obviously her movement's not what it used to be. For me, she needs to start playing power hitters, which is totally backwards. But if somebody that she could also out hit, and if it gets to a tight situation, rely on experience, I feel like she would actually have a chance at some of these tournaments if she was given a player like that. I still would stand by the fact that maybe Emma Raducanu, who she's going to play tomorrow, is actually quite a good matchup for her, because Emma has struggled against power players lately. But yeah, overall, I wouldn't be too scared at facing a Rybakina, somebody with a sort of powerful weapon that can maybe get broken down, even a Saka in this state, Andreescu, players like that, basically. Has she got a chance? Am I talking rubbish? Not sure.
Well, look, props to her for winning against Paritzas Diaz. I didn't see the Bencic match, but I saw the Paritzas Diaz match. And Paritzas Diaz is, again, a Spanish player, kind of like a Sara Sorribes Tormo, who gets the ball back. So Serena did have to do a bit of running, and despite that, still won, because she could out-hit her, and because she has that variety that a great player like her has to deploy. Bencic I didn't see, but the way you describe it, exactly how I thought it would have gone. It's how I think the Raducanu match will go. I think Raducanu and Bencic are very similar players. And yes, while Raducanu struggles with pace, I don't think Serena's hitting with the same kind of pace as some of the Georgie or Samsonova does at the minute. It's a very different kind of pace, more like the kind that the Sakkari has done. I've only done this because I've rewatched all of Raducanu's US Open recently, but that's a massive tangent. On Serena, I think if she's given the right player, like you're saying, I agree with you, she could win that match. If it's a good matchup for her, if she doesn't have to move that much, then yeah, for sure, she can still hit with the best of them and break someone down. It's just the case of, if you can move, the movement is a big problem right now. And I don't think it's the age. I think it's the lack of match fitness for her that's causing issues. She's not played a professional match in over a year, and it's showing. I also don't know how much she's enjoying being out there. I think she's out there for the sake of, I want to do this one more time for me.
Yeah, I think definitely agree with the sentiment, Nick, for sure. And the fact that she's maybe just here for the one last hurrah, and she maybe I don't think she necessarily cares as much about the winning as she used to, could actually make a big difference, and certainly the rustiness will as well. I think you're quite right. So yeah, stuff to consider. And if she does make a deep run, it'll be probably at any of these tournaments, it'll probably be the craziest story of the last 10 years. So, well-ish, but it'll still be quite a crazy story. So yeah, fingers crossed for it. Definitely, everybody would love to see it. Yeah, of course, it would be amazing. Would you like to talk about the biggest early exit, probably, if it counts as an early exit, in Iga Swiatek losing to Haddad Maia? I don't know if you got to see any of that, Nick. Did you see any
I
of it?
did watch that match. Yeah. Some people will call me crazy. I chose to watch that match instead of the Ruud Bautista Agut match. Although in my defence, I would have watched the Ruud Bautista Agut match had it not been rained off temporarily, and I had to find some tennis to watch. So anyone who probably knows me, I'm a big Iga Swiatek fan. She's probably my favourite female player on the tour at the minute. So there was a little bit of disappointment for me, but like watching that match, she didn't play a very good first set. She was not there was way too many errors on the forehand. It wasn't working properly. The backhand wasn't as solid as it should be. She just seemed to be hitting it at the wrong places. Then the second set was more like how we'd come to expect. She solidified, she knuckled down, she maximised every opportunity she had. And it looked like it was going that way, like after the first game of the third set. And then Haddad Maia just upped the aggression and really started hitting bigger and hit deeper. And although Swiatek can manage that pace better than a lot of other players, it's still a massive challenge for her, and she couldn't really deploy a lot of her weaponry very effectively. And I think it did rattle her how much Haddad Maia was coming at her. So I don't really count it as, it's the last 16. I don't count it as that early an exit, and I don't think it was a bad loss considering that A, Haddad Maia reached the final, B, she's been a form player since the clay finished. So if you look at how she did in the grass, how she's kind of done on these sort of faster courts this week, she seems to really come into her own. Though I don't like to see Swiatek lose, I didn't think it was a bad loss for her.
Yeah, no, it definitely wasn't a bad loss. Haddad Maia, absolutely somebody that she could have lost to. Big weapons, obviously, in her game. And yeah, you're right. She did start slowly, but for me, the reason for that was probably a lot to do with the conditions rather than just Haddad Maia. Certainly, the lefty serve in the windy conditions for Swiatek made her backhand return look a lot weaker than it actually is. That is not how she would normally play in a hard court, and certainly, I think it made a massive difference to the impact of the match for sure. The other two things that made a big difference for me: Swiatek not really able to use her forehand as reliably as she would like because of the leftiness of Haddad Maia, trying to use her forehand cross court into Haddad Maia's backhand. Surprisingly, maybe for some people, it was actually worse than going into a forehand because you're able to defend a little bit easier in your backhand and you can't really build the point as easily as if somebody's stretching out for their forehand just with the one hand on the racket. So it actually made it a little bit harder for Swiatek to build the point as she would normally like to. At the same time, she is very good against lefties, so her inability to do that was a little surprising. But yeah, Haddad Maia's defence in the backhand is actually seriously impressive and maybe part of her game that people don't give her too much credit for. Exceptionally impressive in this match, at least. The last thing as well was Haddad Maia's ability to capitalise on second serves. Again, like Caroline Garcia, like Danielle Collins, people who have beaten her this year, able to step into the court and take the return early. She didn't quite do it as well as those two players. However, she did it consistently enough throughout the match just to make a little bit of a difference in important points. For me, Haddad Maia played a really good match and dealt with the conditions a lot better than Swiatek. So that made the biggest difference. And if you're a Swiatek fan, I wouldn't get too worried just yet. I think should be okay, definitely. Are you happy to talk about Coco Gauff?
Yes, definitely. She impressed me this week.
The first match I'd like to talk about from Coco Gauff is her match against Elena Rybakina. I'll just very quickly run you through the absolute crazy drama of it and ask for your opinion on how Gauff dealt with it, because I had a little bit of a rough opinion on it on Twitter. Not myself, sorry. I heard a little bit of a rough opinion on it on Twitter. Basically, Rybakina saves 4 match points in the second set tiebreak. Really good stuff from her, like a clean forehand return winner, I should say. Incredibly impressive stuff. Then a half volley, crazy winner to actually get her own set point, basically. Really, really impressive. Not really much to do with Gauff. Gauff then leads 4-2 in the third set. Double faults 3 times Okay, that is a lot to do with Goff. Then leads 5-3 in the third set and double faults another 3 times. Okay, yep, it's definitely still to do with Goff. Fair enough. Trades mini breaks in the third set tie break where it inevitably goes. First 7 points are all mini breaks. And then Goff knuckles down, plays one of the craziest, most defensive points of her life, gets to absolutely every ball. Rybakina eventually misses and kind of goes on to win the match basically from there. Also does the same thing against Sabalenka in a third set tiebreak after some pretty scrappy stuff. My opinion on it is that she played a pretty bad match and she still was able to come through, and it's not the sort of match she would have won in the past. Do you not think she deserves plaudits for that, Nick? Because there are some people on Twitter who do not agree.
100%. I'm not going to be that harsh on her. Like, she played well for most of the matches. It's just a couple of games, a few games at critical points that definitely she needs to improve her match management on. But yeah, her ability to keep fighting, to win through these matches where a lot of other players would have just completely faded. She just rose to the challenge, and that tie break against Rybakina in the decider where it was just completely messy from both, and then she was the one who went in for the kill and she got it. So 100%. I think Goff, if she can work out the issues with her, with the double faults, with getting tight in matches, she could be unbeatable. So I think that's all I will say is, despite the scrappiness of it, Goff's having a great year, had a great tournament. I think the people that you're referring to, and I didn't see very much of it on Twitter, the people you're referring to are wrong on that point. Even though I will probably be kinder than her than perhaps you would be.
Yeah, sky's the limit. I think it was the takeaway from that, Nick, and I definitely agree with you because if she irons all that stuff out, and she's shown she's got the fight despite all that, then yeah, she could be a world number one, which is a nice segue into the fact she is world number one in the doubles now, only 18 years old. Super exciting match to get her the world number one position with Pegula against Melikar, Martinez and Perez. 7 match points saved by the other pair before Goff and Pegula got over the line. If you want to see the most dramatic of the 7, I would recommend watching 6-5 in the second set at Deuce. Obviously, that's a match point or a break, a game point. Sorry, super lob from Nicole Melikar Martinez that prompts Pegula to put her hand on her mouth in shock was really, really dramatic stuff before they eventually came through in a match tiebreak. She becomes the second youngest player to achieve the feat, slightly younger than Anna Kournikova and older than Martina Hingis, who was 17 years old at the time when she became number one. So good. Yeah, I think it just backs up all the points you just made, Nick. Definitely.
Yeah, and yeah, the fact that she's doubles number one is, it's really impressive, as you say, like so young, so early in her career. A doubles major can't be far away for her, surely, especially with how she's playing alongside Pegula, who I hope we get to talk about at some point because I think she's having a great season as well. It's not getting talked about enough in singles and doubles. Goff. I think I'm saying I'm marking Goff as someone who could get on a very exclusive list of people who've been world number one in singles and doubles. I'm not going to say that's going to happen this anytime soon. I'm not going to put that much pressure on her. She's got a lot to work out in her singles game, as we said, but I think that's going to happen in a few years.
Yeah, definitely. And so it's also a nice segue into talking about Jessica Pegula because I do want to talk about the semi-finalists that didn't make it to the final. Jess Pegula, now world number 8 in the singles and the doubles, by the way, continuously proving once again that she deserves to be ranked where she is. Has made 2 Slam quarterfinals this year, Australian and the French, 2 WTA 1000 semi-finals here in Miami, and of course the WTA 1000 final she made in Madrid when she lost to Jabeur. You know what you're going to get when she plays. I have a stat maybe to sum up our level, and it's that's not a bad thing. That's not a slight. I'm just saying this is a good summing up of our level. She maybe doesn't quite have the weaponry to beat players ranked number 1 to 15 at the moment. She has 2 wins to 8 losses this year against ranked 1 to 15. Against players ranked 15 to 60, Nick, 17 love this year.
That's impressive, and that's why she is where she is right now. Um, Especially when you consider how deep the talent is on the WTA tour. Looking at the very who's at the top at any particular point isn't always that relevant because it's so fluid, and form is so much more contracted. It's so much more based on maybe 3 month performance than it is 12-month performance. And yeah, I get what you mean. I think yeah, you're probably right. She does lack something against a lot of top players. But again, she has got those couple of wins. I could see her going on a run, and getting a good result, a bit like the kind of season we saw from Caroline Wozniacki a few years ago before she retired, where she just consistently banked deep runs in tournaments before she started winning them. Obviously, Wozniacki at a very different point in her career to Pegula. But I definitely think that she's overdue a big win, a big title win, and I not overdue, but like she's due one. I think it's coming. But yeah, I'm very impressed with how consistent she is. Probably the most consistent player on tour, other than Swiatek, for me. And I think in the era of how, as I described, like the WTA top guys being sort of very having very much short purple patches. Um, that's a really, really valuable asset that she can have that should always be there. I think Kasatkina's working her way into that category as well. But yeah, Pegula, I think there's more to come from her. I didn't see the match she lost against Halep. I saw the infamous tweet about it, but I didn't see the actual match.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. Like, I very quickly just want to talk about Karolina Pliskova making the semi-finals of this week, because her season had been absolutely terrible. However, she managed to put a run against Krejcikova, Anisimova, who she double breadsticked, by the way, Sakkari and Kim Win-zeng to make the semi-finals. I mean, that is some list of players to beat in the same week, and quite frankly, I wouldn't have picked Pliskova to beat pretty much any of them, probably apart from Krejcikova. Obviously, at the start of the year, she was coming back from injury. She feels like her game is coming back slowly, she said. Return in particular, coming back to its best. You know how volatile and risky a shot it is, so a lot of feel in that shot and being able to absolutely tee off on it, of course. She's back to blowing people off the court. Absolutely love it, obviously, because I like Pliskova's game. I remember her playing Barty last year at Wimbledon in the final, and it was probably one of the matches of the year for me when she did eventually get settled. Do you enjoy watching Pliskova? Do you hope she keeps doing well, Nick? How do you feel about her?
Pliskova's got a unique game because everything she hits is so flat. And I can't always decide whether I like watching it or not, because the results are often very spectacular. But when she's not playing well, it's not great to watch. When she is playing well, it is great. But with Pliskova, um, it really depends on the day, whether she shows up or not, which is a shame because her ultimate top level is really good. Like, she's got multiple 1,000 titles. She's two-time Grand Slam finalist. She's she's got a lot of talent, but doesn't consistently deploy it, and it doesn't surprise. It's been very typical of her the last couple of years that she'll have a fallow run and then something will pick up. She seems to like playing in Canada and on the US hard courts. So I'm interested to see how she does in Cincinnati. Um, so yeah, I thought it was a good run, but I wasn't massively excited to see her in the semi-finals. That being said, if she'd won the tournament, I would have been very happy for her. I think she's had a bit of a rough period. She's let her coach go. Um, yeah, um, I think Pliskova's game, when it's working, is very exciting. But I think when I was watching that match, I thought Haddad Maia was the more interesting player to watch and to win. But that's not a slight on her achievements at all, on Pliskova's achievements at all.
Yeah, no, that's a diplomatic answer again, Nick. But I agree with you. She can have some pretty rough days, obviously, and certainly most of the season there's been a few of those matches for sure. So I absolutely understand where you're coming from. Yeah, Haddad Maia, though. Yeah, I'd like to talk a bit more about her. Thank you for mentioning her, of course. Yeah, very good matches throughout the tournament. Again, a really tough run. Trevisan in the first round, maybe not so much in a hard court, but certainly Fernandez, Bencic, Swiatek, obviously. Pliskova in the semis, playing well. You know, I was super, super impressed that she is able to sort of carry her success on off the grass courts. It shows she's not just a one surface pony, so to speak. Super impressive. And in the final against Halep, she wasn't terrible actually. I would just like to talk about the quote actually first before we do move on to the final though. You could see Jessica Pegula, as you were saying, the infamous tweet, shouting, "She's pushing, she's such a pusher," during her loss to Simona Halep. It has come to my attention first, just before we talk about this, Nick, that some people don't actually know what a pusher is. The explanation I could give you maybe is that players that are pushers will focus on getting the ball back in play, maybe without taking on a huge degree of risk. We'll go for safer shots over riskier shots, certainly. At the highest level, some pushers could also be known as counter punchers, players that can use the pace of an aggressive ball from the opponent to work the point in their favour. Maybe is a diplomatic way of talking about a pusher. I don't think there's anything wrong with being a pusher. Nick, it's another way to play the game, right? Consistency is key, and if it gets you the win, so be it. Do you not feel like that?
I completely agree. I think actually playing consistently in tennis is actually more important than the weaponry that you have to finish a point. Because if your weaponry is malfunctioning, if you're consistent and staying in the points, then it becomes outlasting your opponents. Generally, tennis points are decided by who misses first, not who hits a winner. It takes a special match for it to be decided by winners, and from both players. And I think that it's a skill that's really underrated, and probably because it's boring, because winners are exciting to see and weaponry and power is exciting to see, and I'm not denying that. I mean, I will draw a deep breath whenever I see Naomi Osaka or Yelena Ostapenko blasting shots. I mean, that Ostapenko French Open final against Halep, when she just blasts away from a set and a break down to win the title, was just awe-striking to me. But I think that being able to stay in the match and stay in points is a testament to physical fitness. It's a testament of skill. It's a testament of mental resilience, and that you can work at your craft. So yeah, I do not see being a pusher as a negative thing. Yeah, it's something that's come up on Twitter a fair bit with the pusher conversation, and I think I'm frustrated by people doing down that category of player who, yeah, counterpuncher is a much better term for what they do, or a consistent hitter. Um, it's frustrating to me. I think it's pretty frustrating for you. It's definitely frustrating for Owen Lewis from Popcorn and Tennis and Bagels. We had a conversation about it. Sorry to plug other podcasts. I'm not part of it, I promise. But yeah, it's a conversation that's, I think, we need to start having about, actually, tennis isn't just about power and impressive shots. It is about that consistency and learning to value what we see.
I yeah, a little bit of an elaboration on that, certainly, because I feel like the final was about as close to a pushy final as you can get. Halep certainly below her best. I think 4 double faults in her first game alone, to give away the break. She was absolutely livid. But I mean, in general, she yeah, you talk about mental resilience. This was about one of the most mentally resilient matches I've ever seen her play, because she couldn't fire on that forehand for so long, yet she was still winning points, because how many balls she was getting back. It felt like Haddad Maia never played a player like this in her life. One of the things, though, to be fair, that sort of dispels the pusher kind of characteristic that we put on her, or the pusher label, I guess, if you want, is the way that Halep's able to trade down the middle. And if her opponent starts to trade down the middle, she is the one that's able to then take on a little bit of aggression, able to whip the forehand cross court, or able to hit the backhand unexpectedly. Basically, brilliant open stance power, helps to disguise where she's going to hit the backhand. She can hit it down the line if she likes. She can hit it cross court. Really, really effective shot. And it worked really well against Haddad Maia, because she could never really relax. She could never just start trading or doing the same thing as Halep, basically. So she was always forced to take on aggression. And in one of the ways she was forced to take on aggression that she definitely was uncomfortable with was attacking with that backhand down the line. And she tried to do it over and over again. That's where a lot of the unforced errors came from. And Halep was obviously aware of that. Rolling forehands in, because she really wasn't attacking with that forehand for a long time. It took a long time for her to feel comfortable, and it probably was because of the second serve failing her throughout the match and feeling like she was under so much pressure. Whatever though, she found a way to win. She found a way to find the court over and over again, and it worked against Haddad Maia certainly, who just couldn't put enough offensive balls in the court. Maybe somewhat surprisingly, considering how well she's played, but I think she just wasn't used to playing somebody that moves as well as Halep, that keeps the ball as deep as Halep, and sort of varies stuff. If she's in sticker situations, basically better than basically anybody else on tour. So it was very impressive for me, Nick, even though it was a very scrappy match, I would say. I don't know if you felt the same way.
It was. I wouldn't call it scrappy. I think it was definitely a physical match. There was a lot of running. There was a lot of long rallies. I completely agree with your analysis. I think maybe Haddad Maya didn't like the fact that she was being the one forced to take the initiative. Like when she was playing against people like Swiatek and Bencic and Pliskova, they were probably trying to take the initiative, and then she was catching them out by sort of redirecting their pace and being able to hit through them. She couldn't hit through Halep, and I think she wasn't always able to hit through Halep, apart from when she was really on her game. I think Halep is one of those players who, because she gets everything back, is frustrating. But not only does she get it back, it's very heavy spun. Oh, you've gone dark. It's very heavily spun. It's a nightmare to kind of pick up. Yeah, I can see why she would be frustrated for it, and having to go for it a little bit more would probably draw some more arrows out of it. Um, yeah, don't get me wrong. I think, yeah, you're right. It was a scrappy start from Halep for sure, with all the double faults. The issue with Halep's game is when it's not working, she's very vulnerable to being beaten. But yeah, very mentally resilient, worked her way back in it, showed us the champion that she is. Halep for me is a player that I always feel like should have won more than she has. I was looking at, she's won sort of 9 out of 18 Masters 1000 finals she's played. She's won 2 out of 3 major finals she's played. I think she's like 24-18 in total career finals played. It's just about 50-50. And I always feel like she should have won a little bit more than she has, but she's won plenty of impressive stuff. And today, when it all clicked into gear, she was the better player on that court.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. But I also feel like she does come out and she plays pretty rough matches, and sometimes she gets away with it, sometimes she doesn't. The fact she gets away with it obviously is incredibly impressive. I think the fact that she has to play such a high level, I guess, has to make so many balls, can be conducive to maybe the odd match that is below her best, basically. But yeah, you kind of still need to give her so much, you know. Just I'm so impressed with the fact that she's able to deliver such a high quality match over and over again. Because there was like 20 shot rallies basically that she was having to come out the other end of, playing maybe below her best basically. So for me, it's so impressive. I love watching her. The way she was able to sort of wriggle out of that match basically and still come out on top. Incredibly impressive, and I really hope she can keep playing this level and it doesn't sort of dip again, because we've obviously seen in the past that she does struggle to maintain that level, or certainly historically for the last year or so, it's been that way. So hopefully the Moratoglu partnership is working for her. Certainly, it seems to be the case. So fingers crossed, Nick. You had Maya now number 15 in the world, Halep number 6 in the world, finally back in the top 10 where she belongs.
I think it's good to have her back. I think I put a tweet out saying, in some ways, if it was a Iga Swiatek versus Simona Halep US Open final, I think we would be in for a treat.
Oh, and that incredibly enticing note, Nick. That sounds amazing. We'll close up shop there. Thank you very much for putting up with obviously some pretty crazy delays. We seem to have dealt with okay though, I think. Please go catch Nick's work at Nick_B Carter on Twitter. Give him a follow, give him some likes, all that stuff. Please go follow me at On The Line _ Jack at Twitter, or you can go to ontheline.tennis.uk to see my blog. Nick, thank you very much for joining me.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Jack. Been really looking forward to this all day. So I'm glad that we could catch up, and yeah, it's been good fun, and I hope that you enjoy Cincinnati.
Thanks very much, Nick. Yeah, thank you. You too. All the best, and thank you very much, guys, for listening this far through. We'll catch you next time on the Online Tennis Podcast. Cheers.